my mother believed sugar was love. I was working out with the biggest and the baddest guys at the gym, and I couldn't gain any weight. But I was, like I said, I was pretty close to vegan. And I don't know if you remember this, Shawn, but you were on, and I thought you were nuts. I genuinely thought you were crazy. That about a third of people biochemically cannot ingest sugar without setting up cravings for more. I believe that biochemically, that this is going to be the worst addiction pandemic the world has ever known. 20% of the people that call me for coaching are crying. They've never told another living soul, men drink and women are using sugar. My only job in life is to get people to see 90 days of no sugar, no flour, no caffeine.
Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker. Revolutionize your health with Revero. Struggling with type 2 diabetes, obesity, or autoimmune conditions? Revero offers a revolutionary approach to treating chronic diseases. With personal low-carb nutrition plans, remote biomarker monitoring, and 24/7 access to expert medical providers and coaches, Revero helps you address the root cause of your health concerns. Be part of the future of healthcare. Join the waitlist today at Revero.com and take the first step towards lasting wellness.
Well, welcome everybody. We have a special guest today with us. His name is Mike Collins. I see on his screen it says the sugar-free man. So I think there's a story behind that. So Mike, if you don't mind, just share with us your background for folks that aren't familiar with you.
Yeah, I don't know how long you want me to go with this, but I have the podcast version, and it starts with another generation back. My mother was my favorite sugar junkie. She was just loving the sugar. And she grew up that way. Her mother died, my grandmother died when she was only 8. And they made a deal with the guy across the street who owned the store that anytime my mother walked into that store, she could have any candy she wanted. And it was nice to do that for an 8-year-old who lost her mom. But at the end of the day, my mother believed sugar was love. And that's how she grew up. Our life was just covered up with sugar. We had unfettered access to the sugar bowl, right? And so anyway, fast forward, I run into beer at 14 years old. And I knew that was changing my state, how I felt, how I was feeling. Because I could talk to girls. I could go to the dance and drink behind the high school. I could talk to the girls, right? Anyway, another fast forward to 28, I got sober. And all I wanted to do was get healthy. I just wanted to get healthy. And there's a lot of interweaving of my movement from vegetarian and veganism to carnivore. But at the end of the day, I was working out with the biggest and the baddest guys at the gym, and I couldn't gain any weight. But I was, like I said, I was pretty close to vegan. But I just wanted to get healthy. So I read a book called Sugar Blues, and I really enjoyed that book, and somehow it just stuck. And I was able to raise a couple of kids sugar-free. I don't know how they talked my wife into it, and they said I should write a book. They said I should, do something about in that field. But I had a regular career. I was a business guy. But in 2018, I did. I wrote a book, and it did well on Amazon. But I opened sugaraddiction.com in 2009, but I didn't really do anything with it. And anyway, fast forward to this pandemic, and I'm all set up. I'm coaching after the book came out and stuff, and all hell broke loose. Oh, I left a piece out. In 2016, I started doing these quit sugar summits, right? And I don't know if you remember this, Shawn, but you were on the second or the third one. I can't remember which one you were on. And I thought you were nuts. I genuinely thought you were crazy. And it was, at that time, I was vegan, vegetarian, whatever. I've been a raw foodist. I've been a fruitarian. And I was thin as hell, you know what I mean? My whole life, I was trying to gain weight. Couldn't figure it out. Anyway, when the pandemic hit, I was geared up. People finally, the perfect storm hit. I had coaches, and I'm coaching and whatever. And the people were using Zoom for the first time in their life, right? They'd never used Zoom. And all hell broke loose in the sugar reduction business. Parallel to this, I'm doing these summits, right? And I'm listening to Gary Fettke and Tim Noakes and these guys that I really respected and in the diabetes space and whatever, and in yourself and whatever. And so I couldn't make myself think about it really. I don't know why, But I ran into this woman. I was the chairman of the board of the Food Addiction Institute. I ran into this woman. Now, remember, at this time, I'm no sugar, no flour, no caffeine for almost 30 years, right? And I'm fine. I started to move towards an animal base. I was eating chicken, I was eating fish, started eating beef, whatever. But I was still using grains, fruit juice, dried fruit. And I had, no exaggeration, I can go through this litany. I had bleeding gums. I had rosacea. I had adult acne. I had basal cells, diagnosed basal cells. You can see they started cutting them off. I was on a recall at the doctor. They were cutting these things off. And the worst part about it is I had these memory lapses. I'm not even 60 yet, and I've got these memory lapses, right? And at the time, both my parents are dying of Alzheimer's, right? And so I'm scared to death, right? So anyway, I run into this woman who worked at the Institute, and she, first of all, she'd been sober 50 years, so she caught my attention. I listened to her. And she had been grain-free, fruit-free, sugar-like. So remember now, I'm I haven't eaten sugar, flour, or caffeine in 30 years and all this. Within 30 days, Shawn, all of those things cleared up. My face cleared up. I haven't had a pimple in 6 or 7 years. And I am this close to 100% carnivore. I'm going to do the world challenge and go basically lion diet in January. And for the first time in my life, I'm not jacked or anything. I'm able to gain weight. I'm able to gain mass for the first time in 20 years. Lifting weights does something to me for the first time in my life. Well, the first time in 20 years, 30 years. And so it's been a transformation that's just blown my mind, really. And I feel so much better. I sleep less. Obviously, the brain lapses took about 3 or 4 months. I'm talking, I would go from one browser to the other browser, and I didn't remember where I was going. And that went away. So just those 4 or 5 physical symptoms was enough to snap my head around. So, and now I'm to the point, I have contemporaries in the sugar business who, one of mine's a friend now for almost a decade, they won't work with vegetarians. And at the beginning, my first coach was a vegetarian. We just got approved by the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches and for the sugar addiction part of our work. And some of my contemporaries won't work with vegetarians, right? And my first coach was a vegetarian. I didn't really want to name a diet. I just wanted to get people off ultra-processed carbohydrates. But I think in January or soon, I'm going to start being vocal about this, that vegetarians, and I've seen this in the data with the folks, is that vegetarians struggle mightily to get it when they're truly addicted to sugar. And we can go into the addiction piece of the puzzle if you like. But anyway, that's the short version of how I ended up here and how I'm talking to you and blowing my mind a little bit that we're having a conversation about it. But
let me just, so I get this fully. So you'd given up sugar, flour, processed things like that for many years, 30 years, still eating a little bit of whole grains, a little bit of fruit, and you gave that up and that resolved those other issues. Now, some people would say, because there's a lot of people out there saying there's no problem with sugar, it's fine, it's more the oils that are a problem. This is the quote unquote seed oils. Yeah. Was that part of something you had given up as well, or was it just fruit and grain and you had already eliminated all the oils from your diet? Just out of clarification.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. The seed oils are more, for me, recent, but they definitely, I can remember back in the day when I would ingest canola oil from something at Whole Foods, I would almost go directly to my heart. I could feel it. I could literally feel it, probably from my existing leaky gut. But yes, in probably the last, I just stopped eating out basically in the last 3 or 4 years. I just can't really, there's not a lot I can do. I have to cook at home now. And so, there wasn't, the seed oils are gone now, but when I was eating out back then, when I was eating the grains and the fruit, and I was eating oats every day and brown rice every day. And when I would get something from Whole Foods to throw on the brown rice, it always had seed oils in it. So
Mhm.
could have been part of the issue for sure.
And the other thing about putting on the muscle, some people would say, hey, maybe just eat more protein. You weren't eating enough protein back in. Was that a big difference for you, the amount of protein you're consuming now with a more animal-based approach?
Oh, absolutely. It was, I followed a guy I liked. He was an athlete. He was a raw food vegan. And just a guy I've interviewed before a couple times, Gabriel Cousin. I've been to his center. It's interesting. You should have Gabriel on, man. He's been a raw food vegan for 30 years, and he ups the protein a little bit by eating a little bit of but he's a keto. This is the craziest thing. He's a keto raw food vegan. He only eats now, after blood tests and dark field microscopes for 20 years, he only eats greens and avocados and olives. I said, Gabriel, that's not enough like calories. He says, Mike, I don't eat for calories. I eat for energy. But anyway, as far as the muscles are concerned, I know it was protein. I know it was. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that sugar addiction, or I guess I should say, I think it's more accurate to say addiction to sugary foods, because I think that's a little bit different than just, I don't know a lot of people that just eat straight up sugar out of the bag.
Right.
There's few people that do that. But for instance, people don't like binge on dark chocolate, like 100% chocolate. Once they start putting sugar in it, then it becomes bingeable. And I think the sugar in the ingredient sort of changes the character of those foods to the point where people will eat them in an addictive way. And I know some people do it with like potato chips, which don't tend to have a lot of sugar in them. But what do you think? That's a minefield. You talked about alcohol addiction, and many people, it's interesting, at least the data I've seen seems like the prevalence of alcoholism is about 14%. The prevalence of food addiction is maybe similar based on some studies. It's a minefield, the modern food supply, the modern whatever consumption supply.
For sure.
How do you address sugar addiction? Because that's where your sort of background came from. Because I think that's still relevant even for people that have gone on a carnivore diet and they still struggle with sugar craving, sugar addiction type features. How do you deal with that?
That's a great question. I'll tell you, I'll start it off with a story. So we never got to talk that day, but I spoke at KetoCon 2 years ago, and you were there. Ken Berry was there, right? And I spoke upstairs, and I went really high. I figured I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm like, everybody's understanding this addiction piece. Maybe I can move this along to their relatives or whatever. And so I went really hard on the addiction piece of the puzzle. And I said, I'll be here if anybody's got any questions, or I'll be out on the balcony. And nothing. Nobody, standing room only, 180 people, nothing. I didn't get one question. But that was a Friday morning, and I'm walking around for the whole weekend, and no exaggeration, Shawn, like 50 people walked up to me with some version of, Mike, I love keto. I'm carnivore, but I cannot quit the sugar, right? I can't get off the sugar. You were speaking to me. And they just didn't want to out themselves or something. I don't know. And so anyway, the answer to your question is real simple. Is like 1/3, this is the research from the Food Addiction Institute and a lot of my contemporaries. And there are work groups that are working on getting it in the DSM and in the ICD-10 as an actual addiction so that you can get insurance from it. And their research says that about 1/3 of people biochemically cannot ingest sugar without setting up cravings for more. And when I first started, for 20 years, I've been helping alcoholics and drug addicts get sober, right? And when I first started, I knew it was similar. I knew that there was addictive. I had gone to some food groups just to check it out and stuff, but I didn't really know how. And now I'm to the point where I believe that biochemically, and I think in 50 years when we have the diagnostic tools to prove this, is that this is going to be the worst addiction pandemic the world has ever known. Because the effect on the nucleus accumbens, the brain reward chemicals, the brain dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, oxytocin, adrenal glands, endorphins, cannabinoid receptors, all of these things are affected by sugar. And we take a little alcohol, we take a little heroin, whatever, but we are pounding as a nation and now a world, 20 teaspoons a day. That's average. Anybody that comes to me with any habit at all is 30, 40, or 50 teaspoons a day. They've never in their life been in a situation where they didn't use sugar, okay, or ultra processed carbs. And as far as you're eating sugar like with a spoon, I used to do that as a kid. It was brown sugar. I would eat it with a spoon. And people come to me, Shawn, 20% of the people that call me for coaching are crying. They've never told another living soul these stories of throwing the stuff in the garbage, pouring liquid, dishwashing liquid over it, coming back an hour later and cutting it off. And if I've done in excess of 20,000 sugar detoxes, at this juncture, it's really pattern recognition. And at the end of the day, it's a very common construct in the world of alcohol and drug addiction that if you started using alcohol and drugs at 14 or 15, you stopped growing emotionally. And if you extrapolate that backwards to someone who's 3 or 4 and they started on a bad sugar habit, they wake up and the reason they can't stop is they've outsourced their emotional life, their emotional management system to sugar. And it's a nightmare. The idea that this is not as real as drug and alcohol. Jack LaLanne said he blames sugar for everything. And I interviewed his wife and she told me the story. And it's like, at this juncture, you've had the remissions like I've had, diabetes, 100-pound weight loss, thyroid, pregnancies. It goes on and on, lupus, chronic fatigue, all these things go away. But honestly, these folks are the most important thing that and this is the story that I told about myself, is that their brain came back online, that they were able to focus more, remember more, their anxiety was lessened. So I'm getting stronger on this every day that sugar addiction is real. It will be in the DSM, and we'll have the diagnostic tools to prove it in 50, 40, 20, 30 years, whatever. But it's just very, very real.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw a recent study came out maybe a week or two ago maybe a month ago, talking about that if a child is exposed to sugar early on, say the first 1,000 days, which is about the first 3 years of life, the likelihood of them developing chronic diseases goes up significantly. So if you can limit or maybe completely not expose your child, your young child, your toddler to sugar early on, that will greatly improve their likelihood to not develop chronic disease. And the unfortunate thing is, if you look at infant formula, corn syrup, often number one ingredient, most of the kids are exposed to sugar very, very early. All these little children's snacks that you see have sugar in them, which is quite disturbing when you think about that.
Oh, it's sad. And there's even a big nonprofit called it 1,000 Days or First 1,000 Days or something. And I always tell this story about my kids, and people think I'm lying or bragging or both, but my kids didn't have sugar in the womb until they were 6 years old. And I'm a smart enough guy, but my boys are like rocket scientists smart, like perfect scores on their college entrance exam smart. And I'm just not that freaking. Their mother is not that smart. In my heart, in my soul, I believe that their brain developed better. And they didn't, coming from my family and her family, they never really developed addictions to substances. It was just never attracted to them because they didn't grow up using sugar when you're a kid and you get a little cookie when you're crying, you start to register this thought process like, cookie. No, and their little body gets this blast of dopamine. They're self-soothed. But the core of this is people have been self-soothing with these substances for so long that they don't really know how to do, like go for a walk, lift weights, go to yoga, get a massage. They don't have a self-soothing practice in place. And that's why they continued. They learned to hack 100,000 plus years of evolution by sitting eating crap on the couch, right? They're worried about their boss. They're worried about their relationship or their finances or something. And they have this ability to just numb it for a little bit, just to shut the worry up a little bit. And if people will realize that this is the real problem, not everybody that comes to me, Shawn, wants a diet plan. They want a food plan, what to eat, and eat less, exercise more. They're like brainwashed by the diet industry, right? And I think it's just coming to the fore with a lot of my contemporaries and people that are doing this over and over and over again, that if they don't understand this emotional piece of the puzzle, then they can't stay off, just like those folks at the KetoCon.
Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker. Revolutionize your health with Revero. Struggling with type 2 diabetes, obesity, or autoimmune conditions? Revero offers a revolutionary approach to treating chronic diseases. With personal low-carb nutrition plans, remote biomarker monitoring, and 24/7 access to expert medical providers and coaches, Revero helps you address the root cause of your health concerns. Be part of the future of healthcare. Join the waitlist today at Revero.com and take the first step towards lasting wellness.
Yeah, and I do certainly believe, I think there's a physiological aspect to this, and I think you have to address that, and you can address that with diet. I think you have to be fully well-nourished in order to mitigate some of that. You can't be hungry all the time and expect to not succumb to the temptation of sugar. And then from the emotional standpoint, and I think you bring up a good point, what is your coping mechanism? Do you have other ways to do it? Because I think it used to be, remember, I think it was Mary Poppins. I think maybe it was Mary Poppins. A spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. And sugar was given because it had anti-nociceptive properties where it would almost have a pain relieving property to it. And so we used it in that fashion to soothe pain. And the problem is what we get addicted to this stuff. And it could be that you have, breathing pattern. There's different things you can do to relieve stress that are there. I'm fairly comfortable with the nutritional standpoint. I think eating a bunch of meat, I think eating a bunch of nutrient dense food is going to be helpful from the physiological standpoint and obviously not eating the garbage. But how do you primarily address that emotional side? What are the techniques that you've found successful?
Yeah, no, and I agree with you that the food part is super important for the biochemical repair that has been done, the damage that's been done in the brain, myelination and fatty in the brain and that kind of thing. You have to have the biochemical repair. You're not going to get there. But the emotional stuff is you literally have to learn other practices, yoga, walking, running, weightlifting, get a massage, get a hug, watch a sunset, call a friend. You have to work at effort. We call it effort-based dopamine, right? And again, when I say dopamine, all the things I mentioned before, people just know what dopamine is now. But the last piece of the puzzle is super important, and you're familiar with it. I'm familiar with it. It's peer. Only thing that ever worked in drug and alcohol recovery. And hell, it works in cancer. Like if you're a cancer survivor and you join a support group, your possibilities of long-term survival go through the roof, because as opposed to someone who's trying to go it alone. And that's it's peer recovery. It's group dynamics. It's being with people, because 80% of the people that work with us do not have spousal support, okay? Let alone the people at school or the people at work or their relatives or anything when they go to a holiday event or something. Their own spouse, their own kids are not involved. They don't want to be involved because mom's changed the diet around the house 10 times. So the three important parts are the food, biochemical repair, obviously the abstinence. A lot of people say, Mike, do I have to do this for the rest of my life? Like, can I not eat sugar for the rest of my life? That's like their main question. And it's also the main question of an alcoholic who goes into recovery. It's like, they didn't go into alcoholic to quit or into recovery to quit forever. They quit. They wanted to learn how to drink normally. And that's what sugar folks want to do. They want to learn to be able to use it normally. And again, about a third of people are not going to be able to. So I always tell them, maybe, but I don't think so. By the time they get to me, I'm the last house on the block. They're like, they've tried it all. So, and they've narrowed it down. I don't know why, but I think you and I have opposite demographics for some reason, but 95% of my clients are women. I just think, and I like to say 45 to 80 or 90, but it's really like 50 to 90. They've dieted their whole life and they've finally narrowed it down to sugar has been their Achilles heel. You know?
So let me just clarify. So in your experience, the demographic that's more likely to be addicted to sugar tends to be female. Is that a fair statement?
Right. And this is all my contemporaries as well. Same thing.
I just wonder if it's a social conditioning that women are have been so heavily driven to low fat that they've been told to be
Oh yeah.
skinny and fat is the enemy and don't eat much meat. And they tend not to. Women tend to eat less meat than men. Women tend to eat more vegetables and salads and things like that, which are inherently lower fat. So they have maybe an energy deficit that they're trying to compensate for. And that often, might be the sugar that they find that is the most efficient way to do that. Am I off base in thinking that?
The good girl's drug for sure. And this is not being sexist. There's research to prove this. And men drink and women are using sugar, and the low fat, no fat stuff in the last 30, 40 years is definitely playing a role in this for sure.
Yeah, so it's interesting. And I fell into this because when I was dating my now partner years and years ago, I remember I thought I'd buy some fancy chocolate, as women like chocolate, and she put it in the cabinet and never ate it. And I said, "Hey, how are those chocolates?" She said, "I don't really eat chocolate," which was really shocking to me to find a woman that really wasn't into that. And she doesn't. She just never really was a sweet person. She rarely eats it, and she's in phenomenal shape and takes care of herself and that type of stuff. And I think that she somehow managed to avoid that growing up. She grew up in France as a kid and avoided all the sugar. And France has lots of good sugar products, if you like, with patisseries and things like that. Viennoiseries, or I'm sure I say it. But anyway, like people that are alcoholics will say they are alcoholics for life. It's recovery. You're always in recovery for the rest of your life. Is that the same? Can we say the same thing of sugar addiction? Would you say that's fair to say?
Yes. Yeah, and I get that question all the time. It's like, do I have to do this for the rest of my life? Maybe. And I'll give you a statistic that'll blow your mind. So because of my openness about my own alcohol and drug recovery, I somehow attract a lot of alcoholics and drug addicts. Now, these are people 5 years, 10 years, 15 years sober from whatever their drug of choice was. And to a man, to a woman, every single one of them says getting off the sugar was harder. And it's because it's everywhere. And you can give this to a baby and no one's going to be arresting you or anything. No one's going to be mad at you. It's just, and you got to eat 3 times a day or twice a day or whatever. And so it's just harder for people culturally. The cultural part is super important. And I have to literally ease people, and it's been a marketing nightmare because nobody wants to be an addict and nobody wants to have abstinence. My only job in life is to get people to see 90 days of no sugar, no flour, no caffeine, right? When they see it, when they see their skin, when they see their weight, when they see their whatever joints, rheumatoid arthritis is a paper tiger. There's no doubt in my mind, 90+% of our folks that have any kind of aches and pains or joints or whatever, they diagnose rheumatoid arthritis, the pain goes away when they quit the sugar. So a lot of people think like one of the main issues with all this is that 100% abstinence from sugar and flour is easier than 90%. And when you heal up a little bit, and that's what I call it, healing up, when you heal up a little bit and then you use again, that cycle continues a little bit and you get a 30 days in between each time, you realize how much it hurts you physically and mentally, emotionally. You're blue the next day, your joints ache after not using for whatever period of time you can get yourself free from it.
Yeah. So as far as this, do you think even for somebody that's going to go back to moderation, do you say, look, abstinence has to be part of the recovery process? Do you think that's a fair way to do it or a better way to do it?
Yeah, they have to reset. They just have to reset. They just have to because there's not, I don't know, there may be one or two, I don't know, but there's no one that ever makes it to my doorstep that has literally even had 2 or 3 days in their life without this product, right? They just have never had any abstinence at all. Now, some of them can muscle a week or a month. You know the statistics as well as I do. 95% of people who lose any amount of weight, gain it all back in the first year and then some. They add it. And 85% of people that come to me for weight loss originally, right? And it's really easy to explain in this kind of discussion that you and I are having, right? In that, okay, so let's say you're going to start on the first of the year here. We're almost there. So, and you're going to, every diet book on the planet says, quit the white stuff, right? And so you quit the white stuff and you restrict, right? And you make it 2 or 3 months or whatever, you lose some weight, your sister's wedding comes up, you're like, I deserve it. I've lost 20 pounds, right? And the cycle begins again. It's not like you needed a beer on a Friday, right? It's not this conscious thought that I'm going to self-soothe because I had a rough week and I need a beer. It's just like a craving or a thought. And then if I heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times. I just had one piece of cake. I just had one this, and they were off to the races and gone from the program for months and to come back with that 20 pounds back on them. So they have to at least give abstinence a try. They've tried every diet under the sun. Just try it. It's just, I call it, let the information light on you. Just check it out for a time.
Given that sugar is ubiquitous, it's in bread, it's in ketchup, it's in salt in some cases, maltodextrin salt.
Yeah.
How do we, to do a break, do we have to give up all that's like, you have to say like anything that has sugar, canes, there's 300 names for sugar that they sneak into foods or something like, I think it's like 60 names.
Yep.
Do you have to give up all that stuff so you can't have even just a molecule? Is that where we're going here? Or is it just, I'm giving up stuff that tastes sweet? Because I guess we're at a point where there's so much sugar in everything, we don't even know something's sweet unless it's super sweet. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, no, it's a fair statement. And look, yes, the answer to your question is yes. For now, I always like to say, you've tried everything else. Try this, just try it. And look, to make the jump to what I'm talking to carnivore is hard. Like, no, there's very few people that are going to do it. But keto is not that hard. So they can ease into it. They can have some berries. And I always get the fruit question. So they can ease into it. Okay. But we have something around here called borderline foods. And those are fruit and fruit juice. You take dried fruit and fruit juice right off you can't eat that. Like you can eat low glycemic berries at the beginning, grains, dairy, and what's the last one? Grains, dairy, and nuts and nut butters, right? Those things, once you start to heal up, they start to bother you. They don't only bother you. The pistachio nuts, when you just finished a whole bag, are calling you from the kitchen to eat the second bag. You know what I mean? Because pistachios have the highest amount of fructose the highest amount of fructose of any nut for some strange reason. And cashews and pecans and stuff aren't even nuts. They're drupes, and they've been bred for fructose, which is the offending molecule mentally, is the fructose. The fructose is, I always tell people, you want to get off sugar, study fructose. Fructose, which I said about a bunch of different ways. But yeah, and I get a lot of blowback until they try it, right? Until they try it. Then too many things clear up for them, weight and skin and whatever, some types of autoimmune and just all kind of stuff goes away.
Let me ask you, this is obviously a controversial topic, but what about artificial sweeteners? Stevia, monk fruit, sucralose, aspartame, on and on and on. Thoughts on that and its role in a sugar addict? Is it something that can be utilized as a transition away? Is it also something that needs to be avoided? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, look, I get crap on that one too, but honestly, there's nothing to sweeten on this diet. Like your taste buds change in 10 days, and carrots are going to taste sweet, peppers are going to taste sweet, macadamia nuts are going to taste like candy. It changes, right? And if you're going to be, like in our program, we don't have to use caffeine, like because it's like wired together, fired together. So there goes the tea and the coffee. A lot of people want to continue with the black coffee. And I got a story that I can tell you about an Olympic athlete who tried that, didn't work. It's like, yes, the answer to your question is, if the brain gets the sweet taste on the tongue, it says to you, where's the calories? Where's the rest of this equation? Where's the sugar, right? It keeps the cravings alive. The last thing you want to do when you do this is to have cravings. The thing I study most in life right now, the thought problems, the studies, the surveys, the studies I'm trying to find are studies on cravings and denial, which is a symptom of the disease, a symptom of the disease of addiction. Denying this is actually an issue. But the cravings part of it is like I said, who the hell wants to do this if you're going to be craving sugar? And craving seems to be like you tell somebody not to eat steak for a month, they could do it. No broccoli for a month, they could do it. But when you tell them not to eat sugar for a month, all hell breaks loose, all chaos breaks loose. They can't do it, literally. They go out in a snowstorm for ice cream. And I don't know, no, you can't. During the reset, during 90 days of trying this, you shouldn't be sweetening anything. And there's no reason. I'm a little disappointed. I won't mention any names. Guys that were my heroes still are, but with this allulose, right? That it has some little GPL1 activations. I don't know what they're doing about it. But it's no different, really. It's not necessarily I separated in from the brain guys and emotion guys and the body guys and gals, okay? For 100 years, we've been studying the body. We know what ultra-processed carbs do. Diabetes, weight gain, heart disease, blah, 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 goes on and on. But no one is talking about what we're talking about here with the emotional addictive upset that these things are causing in our brain. The last 3 years really, with Chris Palmer and George Ede, this understanding of what's a new field of metabolic psychiatry, the understanding that the brain is an organ and it's being affected as bad as the liver with these products, right? And maybe worse. And it's running the show. So no sweeteners.
Yeah, I've seen some people touting the supposed superiority of allulose as a alternative sweetener for various reasons. And I look at my diet, I eat steak every day and I eat eggs. I don't need sweeteners for that stuff. I guess I just don't need to tickle that taste bud anymore for whatever reason, good or bad. Cravings, if somebody's on a 90-day reset, they start a carnivore diet, cravings will happen. I tell people to count on it. It's going to happen at some point, maybe day 3, maybe day 10, maybe day 214. I don't know.
Yep.
How do we deal with that? How do we deal with cravings in the acute sense? What do we do?
Well, like I said, it's at this juncture pattern recognition for us. We've done so many detoxes that the real dangerous part physically is days 1 to 10. The real dangerous part mentally is between days 10 and 30. And once you get past 30, the noise quiets, the chatter. They're talking about GPL1 common that for addiction of all kinds, food and alcohol. But the abstinence will calm the noise, the cravings, right? And you'll have time to think it through. You'll be able to say, shit, I've lost 5 pounds and this is day 24. I'm not going back. Otherwise, there's no immediate gratification necessary right away. So yeah, I forgot the question. I'm sorry, I got up there.
Well, I was just asking how you deal with cravings.
Oh, yeah, okay. So the cravings is the group part of it. You want to join the group part of the process. You know what I mean? It's like you get in there and you find these people that are 2 and 3 years and they haven't had any of this stuff. And they tell stories of losing 50 pounds, 100 pounds, whatever, and putting whatever in remission and what have you. And it's a whole 5, you become the 5 people you hang around with the most. And now there's proven science that you become the weight of the 5 people you hang around. So it's like you have to be in a group. And there's 100 studies about this, or 200, I don't know, there's a lot of them. You have to be in a group of people who are doing the same thing, moving in the same direction. The cravings, exercise is the number one way to get through it, okay? It's the number one way to get through the process. And there's other ways. You have to think of it. One of the things that, if this is a reframe, if you will, you're not looking for a sweet taste on your tongue. You're looking for a dopamine hit. Again, dopamine, serotonin, on and on. You're looking for a change in your state of how you feel and your body. This is why I study cravings. I say, how can the limbic brain have co-opted the frontal lobe and the frontal cortex into this idea that you should go out in a snowstorm to get ice cream, right? How could this be possible? And obviously, we're not far enough along in brain science to understand that, but you've got to uncouple the two things.
What do you think the people that distinguishes the people that relapse from the people that don't relapse? Is there anything inconsistent? You say these people are going to relapse because they haven't addressed this issue, or how do you distinguish that? Or can you?
Yeah, no, it's hard. It's hard to tell, but I can tell if I've done a proper intake. I can tell the ones that start really early. I think one of your guys is asking why I have the caffeine in there, and I'll weave this in a little bit. But when they start really early, if I find out that they were obese kids, kindergarten, like that's really hard because they've never had any experience of normal weight. Most people, because they're 40 and over, 40 or 50 and over, they didn't really grow up with like that much sugar. They at least got to high school or college before they started gaining a pound or two a year. So that group of people has a difficult time, a really difficult time. And that's one of the only ways that I've been not guaranteed, but pretty sure that it's going to be a wrestling match. It's going to be tough for them. But if people had muscle memory, they were an athlete, they were someone who has a memory of not being in a bigger body, then not that they're easier, but I guess it's their willingness to participate. And you can't really judge that coming in, right? And honestly, relapse is real. Relapse is just part of the process. People go back and forth, sometimes for a long time. Some of my coaches were in the program 2 and 3 years before they finally caught on. They come back every New Year's and start again. And as long as you never quit quitting, then you can make it through. But you can stop any time. But I don't think there's any way to figure out which is which, to be honest with you. Like who's going to be which, who's going to do it and who's not.
Okay, fair enough. How long do you think it takes to somebody? Is 90 days like the minimum buy-in, or is 90 days all you need?
Well, this is not like a diet, and there's not one and done. You go back to normal, quote unquote. This is you make your own decision. It's not my job to tell somebody they're an addict. Okay, like they know in their heart of hearts, and the reset only. And I don't mean to say it this way, but it's true. A relapse will prove it to them categorically because they're just going to feel lousy. Like if they really make 90 days and at 91 they go for a bender or something, they're just going to feel lousy. And so to answer your question, like I'd go a year. Like this is a thing that you can always go back to. It's not like it's just how long did they struggle and how long do they want to struggle. You can always just pick up whatever at the 7-Eleven, but you can't buy this science anywhere. You can't buy this diet plan anywhere. You can't there's no pill or shake. This is not something there's no other process but to try to commit to a time of abstinence.
And you said you've been doing this for a number of years, and recently we have these new drugs on the market, GLP-1 receptor agonists, Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy, Zepbound, that people are losing weight on. How does that impact sugar addicts? Is that something that's useful for them, or is that something that is just a kind of a temporary Band-Aid? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I'm starting to run into it a lot. And there's a couple people that are doing a little microdosing, which I would be more in favor of because I think there's too much in the pens. But before they came out or got popular in the last few years, we dealt a lot with bariatric patients, post-bariatric patients, right, who had figured out how to hack their smaller stomach with sugar. And they just gained their weight back, right, even though they had the smaller stomach. And you and I are old enough to have lived through the fen and whatever else, all these other drugs and stuff. And I always tell this story. I don't know if I should tell it. Yeah, I'll tell it here. So look, if you're going to a concert and you got a little pot and a little beer and a little cocaine and a little acid, what's the goal? Well, the goal is to, not when the first band comes out, but when the main band comes out, to be perfect, to be just right. And people are doing this with their coffee and their sugar. You can't have too much coffee for that meeting. You'll look stupid. And you can't eat sugar now. And it's that free rent that it's in your head, like with these legal drugs, right? So it's just, you can't, I don't know. I think people have to, this is experiential. You have to try it to see if it's something that you can live with. And if you can find a peer group that is doing it also, right?
Yeah, I find that there's definite support. There's definite benefit in a supportive environment. We see that with success. If you don't have support, the likelihood of you being successful is diminished. In some places, quite a bit. So it's important to have that. One of the problems that a lot of people have is other people in the house. Because if you're a sugar addict and you live with your wife or your husband and you got kids and they're not interested in giving up their sugar. So how do you approach that particular situation?
That's a hard one. Like I said, 80% of them don't have spousal support. And one of the suggestions, they're not rules or anything, but suggestions is to clear out the house. Because if it's in the house, it'll start talking to you from the refrigerator or the cupboard. You have to clear out the house in the early days, and it helps. And you have to have your spouse move his stuff to the garage or the kids or whatever. But it's hard. I'm just going to say it's hard. It's a harder lifestyle, a harder early days. Once you get some time in, it's not as difficult. And eating out is the same. We've got some tricks for that. Most of the time, and I'm just going to shoot you straight, Shawn. It's like, this is in essence a codependency recovery program. It's a recovery program where you have to learn how to stick up for yourself. You have to learn how to say no. Most of our folks are people pleasers, generally. They've helped their kids, their boss, their teachers, they've raised their kids, they've raised their husband. They are helpers. And they forgot about themselves, right? They don't know how to say no. They don't know how to support themselves, stick up for themselves. And no is an acceptable answer in the restaurant or at the house. And you just stop buying the stuff. You want to buy it, buy your own. You know what I mean? There's just a lot of stuff. They're all little tips and tricks and suggestions. But at the end of the day, you've got to, and I hate the term pull yourself up by your bootstraps because that's not really what this is. I'm the furthest thing from tough love. But you really do have to set boundaries, another kind of codependency thing. You have to set boundaries and stick to them. You have to take care of yourself. Most people like that feel guilty when they're going to the yoga or whatever, and there should be picking up the kids or something. Tell the husband to go pick up the kids. And they feel guilty, and the phrase is feel the guilt and do it anyway. Like this has to be part of your growth process. It's not like just eat less and exercise more.
You'd mentioned that you find people that were obese from childhood that got into this early on are more difficult. How do you deal with them? What additional things have to be done to deal with someone who's been overweight or addicted their whole life?
You just have to use the phrase keep coming back, because they just have to stick with it, even though they fall off and come back and fall off and come back and fall off and come back. It's just part of the process. The introduction of the carnivore thing, one of my favorite contemporaries is very big on the biochemical repair, which means you're fixing the brain. The whole Chris Palmer, Georgia Eid stuff. It's like you really have to fix the brain, and you have to focus on fixing the brain, which means you might have to skip over even all of the what we called borderline foods earlier and go as heavily animal-based as you can, eggs and meat and chicken and fish and stuff. And let's get that brain. You know the research. They know the research. They come to me very smart. It shrinks your brain. You have holes in your brain. Like it's like you're no longer like it's not the real brain. So you've got to do that first, and then they can make it through, and they do make it through. It's not like it's impossible. It's just a little bit more difficult. It seems And people don't like addicts because they lie and they cheat and they steal, and they're going to do it. It's just, and you can't abandon them. You have to stick with them over the time period. If they're willing to keep coming back. There's no like tough love in that scenario, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Mike, we're just about out of time. It's been a good discussion here. If you don't mind, maybe share your sort of stat or your information where people can find out more.
Yeah, I don't know when this will air. We have our Quit Sugar Summit yearly. You should come back. We got Ken Berry this year and Ben Azadi and Sarah Zaldivar. We have some good folks over there on January the 6th, or just anytime you hear this, just put your name in there. We'll tell you when the next one comes along. I'm the Sugar Free Man everywhere on social, or sugaraddiction.com. Just go and grab a copy of my book. It's there. You can download it.
I appreciate it. Well, thank you for this, and good luck with the summit, and good luck with 2025. And I think the message is getting out there. Obviously, the sugar addiction stuff is a real issue, I think, for people, and it's unfortunate. And I think we got to keep fighting. So appreciate you doing this.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Shawn. Appreciate it.